Silence. So, welcome to another great Mobile Monday event. Okay, question here, who's first time at a Mobile Monday event? Half of you guys. All right, awesome. So look at the person on your right, shake their hand, introduce yourselves, give them a hug. So, my name is Tapia, and I've been putting events like this this is my 13th year. Actually had my anniversary, so long time doing these things. And so I got a little slideshow to kind of welcome, to show you a little bit what Mobile Monday does, talk about also the event that we have tonight for legal topics. So let's squeeze it over here. So tonight, I'll just do the introduction. We'll have Lauren, who's also one of our sponsors and hosts tonight. She'll talk about her event. We also have also Keynote from Yokum. We'll both go on 23 minutes, and then we'll do a panel discussion afterwards. I also want to thank our sponsors tonight. It's Pereira O'Dell, which is also the venue there. And Sonsini is also one of our sponsors tonight. Yeah, can you guys upstairs hear me okay? If I talk like this. All right, guys. So Mobile Monday, we're a bunch of entrepreneurs, professionals, and developers. So there's an event like this probably happening in another 20 cities tonight around the world. We do this once a month. And also, Mobile Monday America, we're a grassroots nonprofit, so we do this for fun. As you can see, well, yeah, this list is pretty big. So we're pretty much all over the world. So you guys are traveling, you guys are part of the community, and kind of look up the city that you're traveling in and see if there's a local Mobile Monday. Group stats, so this is a couple of months old, but we're pretty much like 30% biz dev sales. Who's biz dev sales? Is that something to sell? Okay. We got engineers. Okay, everyone wants an engineer. Engineers in the house? Okay, all right. We also have product and marketing guys, product marketing folks. Yay. Designers. Yeah, you guys are a rare species. Okay, VCs. Okay, don't be shy. Okay, that guy's not in there. We also have media. Anybody from media? Bloggers. Okay, everyone has a blog in it. Okay, cool. So that's pretty much our community. Pretty much involves the whole ecosystem. So who's in a big company, 500 plus? Who's in a startup, 2 people, 1 person? Who's a founder? Oh, a founder. Who has legal problems? Okay. All right. So here's some of our old sponsors. So I had a long questionnaire. Sorry to put you through all that trouble, guys. But so I asked, okay, what phone do you guys use? Obviously, a lot of hipsters with iOS, and a lot of engineers with Android, and a lot of business people with their Blackberries. Okay, the Finns are here. Nokia people, who's got it? Palm, nice. Okay. And Windows Phone, this is interesting. This is growing. So we'll see over the year how this happens. Who's left with Windows Phones? That's why you guys are attending. A lot of you guys are very social. You just want to be educated.
Mario, speak up.
Okay, who's looking for a job? Unemployed people. I need a. Or if you're with a coworker, you don't have to raise your hand. Networking with industry colleagues. So you guys like puzzles, so very social. I asked about development platforms. So this is interesting because you guys get to see, since we're at the center of the universe for mobile now, this is really good for trending. So iOS, definitely a lot of folks, and I think it does monetize a lot. Android, quickly catching up. I think a lot of people have figured out, hey, I've already built my iOS. Next strategy is do my Android. Windows Phone is actually growing, and there's a lot of HTML5 going on. So it'll be interesting to see where that pivot happens from going native to actually going to HTML5. And still we have some of the other feature phone legacy stuff going on with Symbian, WebOS, and RIM. If we could build an app for only one platform, what would it be? And obviously a lot of guys are still iOS tonight. Android And a couple of months ago, we had more Android people publishing than iOS. And obviously, HTML5 is still a strong leader. The other one was, okay, SDKs. So for the nerds here, payment and billing. So that's a big one. App promotion, some folks. Analytics, definitely want to figure out what's happening, what users are doing with their devices, and also advertising. So these are interesting to see where people are, what SDKs you guys are using. What type of ads make you more money? So this is really interesting. So a lot of guys, video is actually kind of killing it for folks. Interstitial ads, the vanilla flavored banner ad is still out there, and also the app install and promotion stuff is really helping them monetize. A little bit about what we do. So we're pretty busy with Mobile Monday. We do about 3 events per month. We have a small event for executives, and this is kind of invite only. You can always ping us if you guys are a founder or an executive in a company want to get on the list. But we have little kind of intimate dinners, topic discussion, more about networking, and we mix it up with big companies, small companies, and VCs. And also there's a moderated discussion. We also have on the technical side, so the roots of Mobile Monday were about engineers. So the first stuff I was doing was, how do I build, who knows SMPP? Like, you know, yeah. So yeah, I think we that at a time. So finding guys like that was very difficult, and also developing the mobile. So we had first started out as kind of a more technical group for just the catch-all for mobile stuff. And eventually we had a lot of verticals of iOS developers and things kind of just fragmented out. And so we kind of wanted to go to the grassroots because we do talk, what I love about this event is that we can do any topic. It doesn't have to be Android specific, iOS specific, app specific. We can pick anything that's trending in the Valley and focus on it. But we also wanted to have a technical group. So we do about 50 guys, engineers only, no marketing because it's going to be boring as hell for you guys. And we pick, a certain topic and bring in 3 competitors, and they all pitch on their certain topics, and then we kind of go deep dive into technical stuff for the event, for the duration. Team, so there's a lot of us now. So I'm Mario, Getjar. We have Jose with Telefonica, Jeremiah with Tau, Daniel Odio with Socialize as the founder, Artie Merritt, Turner, I think Artie's around here. We got Artie. John Lynn, who's always doing our videos. So Ustream, so this thing is on Ustream all the time. So we have a channel on Ustream, Mobile Monday, Silicon Valley. So every event is recorded. You missed this, tell a friend, hey, watch this. It's actually pretty good. We get a lot of visits there. Brandon's down here. He's handling the beer somewhere around there. Ryan helped us with Rumor Ventures. He helped set up the food. So if you got some food, thanks for Ryan. And we also have a new addition is Rebecca Island with Talk to Communications and PR, some networking stuff. Where to find us? MobileMonday.us. We also on Twitter. So hashtag is pound momosv. Want to take a look at that. Just another note, we have a Yahoo group, and the Yahoo group is going to be migrated back over to Meetup. So a lot of you, who's found us on Meetup? Yeah, okay, cool. So we're going to move over there. There's a better discussion. Yahoo groups is so 1997. So we finally decided to move the conversation over to Meetup. I think it has a lot more interesting features to use. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Lauren, who's one of our hosts tonight.
Hey everyone, thanks again for coming tonight, and thanks to Mobile Monday, especially Mario and Ryan Bloomer, who invited us to sponsor, so appreciate that. Really brief, Pereira O'Dell is an advertising agency. This actually used to be an old speakeasy, a lot of you were wondering. So this used to be our startup back about 4 years ago, and then we moved down 2 doors. And so we're a traditional advertising agency. We specialize in digital, and then POD Connect is our social media department. So I meet with a bunch of different tech and social media startups every week, just to like to hear what's coming down the pipeline. So thank you all for coming, and including me. So very brief, there you go.
Thanks, Lauren. Give a hand for Lauren. Next we have Yokum from Wilson and Sonoma, and he's going to give a nice for a change, a slideless talk, which would be interesting. So please welcome Yokum.
Thanks, Mario. If you cannot hear me at any point, please shout and say, talk louder, Yokum. So I feel like I need to do like the 30-second commercial advertisement for Wilson Sonsini because our marketing people told us to do that or something like that. But how many people actually showed up here for the topic, like legal stuff? Really? Like how many people actually showed up because they just wanted to network with other people? So I've given variations of this talk with slides and without slides, and it generally degenerates into like the Stump the Attorney day. So we can play Stump the Attorney later, but if you have like a really pressing question, we can play Stump the Attorney first off. But anyway, about myself. So Wilson Sonsini, Goodrich, and Rosati. I have to say the last two names because Mario Rosati is still working at the firm and he gets really annoyed if you don't say WSGR. It's been around for about 50 years. We're kind of the 800-pound gorilla of representing startup companies in the Valley. We do more venture financings than anyone else every year, or so our marketing people say. The reason why I guess I am stuck here talking to you is I do a lot of venture financings. I did more than anyone else at Wilson Sonsini last year. I also incorporated about 100 companies or so and 100 venture financings last year. So I see a lot of early stage companies, especially the ones coming out of incubators like Y Combinator, 500 Startups, AngelPad. A predominant bunch of them are mobile focused. Some of you might already like kind of know me for some reason. I have a lot of blog stalkers, so I have a blog at startupcompanylawyer.com. So a lot of times like people will come up to me and go, oh, you're that guy. And I go, yeah, what? So, okay. So if you Google me, you can find my blog. But anyway, back to this topic. You know, you can go Google something like startup legal mistakes and other stuff like that, and you'll find a whole bunch of slides telling you a bunch of stuff, and for the most part, it doesn't make any sense until you actually go through it. So first, I want to gauge how many people are actually thinking about starting a company, or why did you show up to this talk? Is it because you're in a startup that has like really crappy legal counsel and you have questions, or is it that you're thinking about doing your own company? Like, how many people are in a startup company that actually has legal questions of some type? Okay, that's a small minority. Okay, so how many people are actually thinking of doing their own startups and that's why they showed up? Okay, so I think most of the people in this room are here because they want some free legal advice on something or another. So there are generally three things that I talk about in these type of talks. So if the topic is startup legal mistakes, probably first and foremost is guys, hire an attorney. Attorneys are cheap. You can find them to do stuff for free most of the time. So that's probably your one takeaway. And there are a lot of practical, hey, hold on, are we actually getting recorded? Okay, so I can't swear.
I know it's the internet, so you can do it.
Okay. No, I just want to make sure that our marketing people don't listen to this later, or any of my colleagues, because I'll get in trouble. So probably three takeaways. The only three things that I want you to remember are, number one, if you're doing a startup company, attorneys are cheap. You can always get somebody to do something for free or on a deferred basis. Number two, if you self-medicate, you can screw up issuing equity. Like that's a screw up that's fatal. You know, if you watch The Social Network, you know, lawsuits and stuff like that, like the guy that's hanging out in Singapore, like got to, so you can screw up equity. The third thing is you can screw up IP. So those are the three things that you just need to walk away with. But as a more practical thing, I mean, I think a lot of you are probably going, well, you know, attorneys are like, you know, really rich dudes that drive nice cars and, you know, they charge a lot of money. So we'll play a game first off. Sonny, what do you think all attorneys have an hourly billing rate. What do you think mine is? 250 to 5? 600 in the audience. 1,000 is way too expensive. Larry Sonsini is probably at 1,000, but 450 is still way too low for somebody like me. Okay. So one of the things that people are oftentimes scared about is like, how much do attorneys really cost? And you know, I hate to freely admit that my billing rate is like $7.75 an hour. And you know, if I get into arguments with people, I can say, well, geez, that conversation just cost you like, you know, $10 or something. But you know, as a practical matter, attorneys that work with startup companies, you can generally get them to give you a lot of free advice by just kind of sitting and talking with them, you know, grabbing coffee. You can always get them to kind of, you know, do work on a deferred basis. So anyway, back to billing rates. Like the way that I explain it is that I've got a lot of information in my head, which makes it really easy to get stuff done. Like I've done it over and over and over again. So it's one of those pattern recognition things. Like seen it before, square peg, round hole, I want you to do it this way. I also say that my billing rate is still cheaper than Elliot Spitzer's hooker. So, you know, there's a lot of things that you can buy on Craigslist that are probably still cheaper than you think, or maybe not on Craigslist anymore. But the way most law firms that work with startup companies work, like, so people say, you know, you're going to screw stuff up, go talk to an attorney. So first thing is, how do you go find an attorney? How many people here are startup company founders, you've already got attorneys? Like, any random person, tell me how you found your attorney. Shout it out. Yes, go find your attorney on Craigslist. Yeah, so best way to find attorneys, go start talking to everyone else you know in this room and say, hey, who do you work with? Is that person competent? Like, you know, do they do good work? That's probably the best way to go find your attorney. I think that's probably the way that I get introduced to most of the people that I work with through people that I currently work with that don't think I'm a total asshole or sarcastic or like still like working with me after, you know, going through deals and finances and whatnot. But given that we're in Silicon Valley, you know, you can go anywhere and like throw a rock and hit an attorney. Like there's so many people working with startup companies that it is not hard to find an attorney. So once you find an attorney, you know, the next question is like, how do you do work with them? So one common way that people like me work with startup companies is we agree to do fee deferrals. So what a fee deferral means is you don't pay us until you raise a round of financing. It may be something like we'll defer a small amount of fees to get you incorporated. It may be that we might defer a larger amount of fees. It really depends on the law firm and on the individual. A lot of people have a fair amount of flexibility to do whatever they feel like. So frankly, I can do whatever I feel like. I could cut a large fee deferral for a company that I think is going to be very exciting and hot, and if the founder has done things like 4 times in the past and been funded by Kleiner Perkins, not a problem. If I run into a 22-year-old kid that's never done a startup company, thinks that they can start coding and do a mobile game and you know end up being a billionaire, you know, that's another thing. But most attorneys that you talk to have a fair amount of flexibility in cutting deals, you know, fee terms and et cetera with various folks. But if you repeat this back to any of my partners, they will probably disclaim what I said. So once again, it depends on the person. It's easy to get attorneys to do fee deferral deals. Sometimes some law firms ask for equity, ask for equity in return for fee deferrals. So, for example, if we run into a startup company where I go, you know, these guys probably will get financing, we'll give them some sort of fee deferral. We'll defer 15 grand in legal fees, but I'm not sure that they're gonna, you know, make it. So in order to account for the risk that we take that we might not get paid, I might say, okay, treat us like a trusted advisor. If we show up at your board meetings, you know, for the next 3 years and we don't really charge you for it, you know, give us the same amount of equity that like a trusted advisor would give. I don't know, like a quarter point, a half a point, 1%. You know, I'm the type of person that you're going to end up talking to for the next like 15 years. I mean, I've been at Wilson Sonsini for 19 years. I'm 44. I'm still going to be doing this 20 years from now. You know, just treat us right and we'll treat you right. So anyway, the point is, generally speaking, you should be able to find attorneys to either do some sort of fee deferral for free, for equity. There's some law firms that will do incorporations for basically free or close to free. If you're in an incubator, a lot of incubators have kind of set deals with certain law firms. So finding an attorney is not a very hard thing to do. And it's fairly easy to go find people because there's so many of them in Silicon Valley. If you were in Chicago, I would tell you you'd be pretty much crazed because there aren't that many people that know how to do venture financings and startup companies in Chicago. Last thing is people kind of want to know how much stuff costs, and attorneys never tell them. So I thought I'd just kind of demystify a few things. So if you walk in and say, hey Yokum, I want to get incorporated and issue founder stock and do an option plan, how much does that cost? I say, $5K, could be less, it could be more. As a practical matter, you fill out an incorporation questionnaire, you shoot it to me, I go over it over coffee with you, you shoot it back to me. Once it's perfectly filled out, I hand it to a paralegal. Paralegal spends 3 hours cranking out 20 pieces of paper. An associate looks at it for an hour. We send it out to you. If everything, if you filled out the questionnaire perfectly, it's like $2,000 in legal work. It's not very much. It's not very expensive. The next thing that happens in a startup company's life is typically some sort of angel financing. So if you're on AngelList or you come out of an incubator and you're doing a financing and you're doing it with the cool kid crowd, south of market that you read about in TechCrunch, that's always on AngelList and whatnot. It costs $5 to $10K to get done. It's really not that difficult to do a financing with kind of the cool kid angel investor crowd. If you're doing a real, and that's a convertible debt financing, you can go Google that, and if you Google it, I think that I will show up as the third result for convertible debt financing in that one. The next thing, if it's not a convertible debt financing, it might be an equity financing. If you do an equity financing using standard documents, I tell people that should cost about 15 to 25K in order to get done if you use Series C documents. If you do a venture financing with a real VC, it probably costs you 25 to 40K to get done, maybe more. So that's generally how much stuff costs. And people don't really say that out loud, that's one of those secrets that attorneys don't like to tell people about. So how many people still, have engaged attorneys and they're working on some sort of fee deferral? Okay, handful of folks. Okay, so that's a good sign. But I think most of you are still in the thinking about working with attorneys standpoint. The reason why I tell you to go talk to attorneys right away is, for the most part, I talk to companies before they're incorporated because there's a lot of stuff that you got to think through. So, I said there were two things that you got to think about: screwing up IP and screwing up equity. And I'm sure that we're going to have a more kind of discussion about this during my panel. But with regard to IP, you're leaving a company. You're leaving Facebook, Google, Yahoo, Apple, somebody that touches all of the internet. Okay? So you're working on a side project and you're at Google. You're basically screwed because you've signed something that says anything that I invent that relates to Google's business is Google's. It doesn't really matter whether you do it on your own time, not using Google's equipment. If it's still in the same business space as your employer, you're totally screwed. So if you're working at basically Facebook, Yahoo, Google, or if you want to do anything in games and working at Zynga or something, you're basically screwed. Don't do side projects in the same space as your employer. Okay, you can ask one question. Once you've left, okay, so the question is, okay, so if you're doing a side project, you've left your employer, generally speaking, you're fine. In California, non-competes are not enforceable post-termination of employment. Whereas in other states like Massachusetts, I think, New York, you work at a startup company that's venture financed in those states, you might get snuck a clause in your employment offer letter that says, or one of your employment documents that says you ain't going to do anything else in this space for 1 year after employment. But once you leave, Google, Facebook, whatever, and you want to do something in the internet or mobile, you can go ahead and do it. Generally speaking, if you're working on a startup company and you're still employed by someone and they're paying your paycheck, please try not to reduce anything to writing. So, like, it's one thing to like be sitting at a bar, kicking around ideas with like a buddy of yours, like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to do a startup company? It's another thing to have like 100-page, design spec that you're going to send to somebody in India to like go design an app for it. Like, that would be a bad fact. But you're sitting around having beers with someone saying, hey, like advertising, privacy, blah blah blah, cookies, I want to do something. That's probably okay. But if you actually reduce it to writing and invent something, I would be really, really worried about that. So talking to attorneys fairly early on in the process will help kind of people stay out of trouble. Because there's a fair number of high-profile lawsuits that have occurred over time where people have left a certain employer and they've gotten sued. Let's see, I'm not going to name particular companies because I suspect that most of the ones who like say bad things about are probably represented here somewhere. But there are particular companies that are very famous for, as an employee retention mechanism, threatening to sue or actually suing former employees. Like let's say you're working at a certain game company and you leave, and you do another mobile game or a Facebook game, there's probably a very high likelihood that you might get sued. It's just part of their standard operating manual. So talking to attorneys about these types of things before you leave is probably a really good thing. The other aspects of IP that I figure I should talk about for a second are, let's see, what else, Brady, what else can you screw up? We're going to go Socratic method. No, we're talking about IP, so. Okay. You weren't paying attention. God. So Brady sat in the office next to me for like 8 years. And you're not paying attention to it. Well, okay. Oh yeah, okay. So so I actually do have slides at some point. I'm just much more humorous when I'm trying to extend speed. But one of the issues with respect to IP is oftentimes you have like 3 folks working together on some project. There's no agreements. One of them starts inventing, ends up with a lot of code. Another person's got designs. None of this is on paper. Somebody gets mad at each other because they make a pass at somebody's girlfriend or something. They go their separate ways, and you're totally screwed in that situation because there's no IP assignments. So the point is, if you talk to an attorney and you tell them, hey, I've been working on this company for a few months now, I got 3 folks working together, and you tell the attorney there's nothing on paper, the first thing that I would say is, guys, please go get incorporated so you can get all the IP assigned to a company. The other situation that's very kind of related to this is, you're working with some contract person that's supposed to design something or build some code. Oftentimes you have, pull off the internet consulting agreement that might have invention assignment clauses or something like that. I don't know, maybe this work, most of the time it's probably not going to get screwed up. Sometimes IP assignments get screwed up in consulting agreements, I don't know, but that's the point in time that you start talking to attorneys, when you're starting to get worried that, hey, if I get this person pissed off at me because I made a pass at the person's girlfriend and the company doesn't go forward, we have this IP problem, that is a seriously bad situation to be in. I've gone through that probably once every 6 months on average with the startup team. So flipping topics. So I said find an attorney is really, really important. I think I talked about how to do that. Second thing is screwing up IP is very, very easy to do. We talked about that for a little bit. So the third thing, so if you watch The Social Network, there's these promises about, hey, I'll give you 1% of the company, or 5% of the company, or X% of the company, and later, people, don't, sue because they don't like what they got. So one of the most common things that happens with people that start companies is, they show up in my office and I say, okay, so did you figure out how much equity each person's supposed to have? And you've got a disagreement about it. One person thinks it's 50-50, another person thinks it's 60-40, another person thinks it's a third. And if you don't get that stuff buttoned out in writing as soon as humanly possible so the ground rules are set, you're totally screwed, because if you have three people working on a project, you start creating some code, somebody walks away because they're pissed off that you only offered them 15% of the company because they were a designer. Maybe you used their ideas, maybe you didn't. That person's probably got a lingering lawsuit after you, once the company raises a couple rounds of financing. So, getting IP stuff and IP assigned to a company fairly early on is, really, really important. If you come to me later saying, hey Yokum, we kind of promised X amount of equity to someone, but they didn't do anything, so we terminated them. That's another situation that kind of bothers me. There's typically an email from someone saying, hey, when you quit your company, when you quit your job at Google and join us, we'll give you 25%. And then once he's been working for you for a couple months, you realize that the guy's a total slacker, doesn't show up until noon and leaves at 5. And you try to get rid of him, and you haven't, gotten in writing and worked with attorneys on very crisp, this is the amount of equity you get, and we can terminate you at any time, and if we do, you only get your vested equity. Stuff like that is a big pain in the ass to solve. Brady, how many times has that happened to you? More times than you can. Does it? Okay, so I suspect that happens to me once every 3 months. I will sit down with a founder who tells me this sob story, and I go, okay, that's what you get for trying to incorporate yourself on LegalZoom. We'll try to fix it. I'm sorry, I don't know what else we can do about that situation. But the other thing that people screw up is when you talk about percent equity, you say, hey, buddy, I'm going to give you 5% of the company. Well, 5% of what, when? Is it 5% at the very beginning, 5% after the company is funded? There's all these ambiguities that it's the reason why we get paid so much money to worry about this stuff and be precise, is there's so much ambiguity that you need to solve when you're doing a startup company that all of this stuff just comes back to bite you in the ass later. And once again, there isn't a good way to solve this stuff. Basically, my answer to how do you solve a screwed up IP problem or how to solve a screwed up equity problem is go to the other party and beg. Just get on your knees, send somebody else, beg them to sign a piece of paper, offer them a bribe, offer them a small amount of shares, offer them an iPad to sign a piece of paper. Otherwise, you're screwed. You just cannot fix this stuff. And people like Brady and I represent investors too. And when we're representing investors, we're basically going through your underwear drawer looking for stuff. And if we find out that there's a former founder that may or may not have claims about the company, stuff like that elevates to oh my God, did these founders have good judgment? How are we going to solve that type of stuff? And the amount of time that we spend at the very beginning just knocking this out, versus the amount of time later to fix this. So if you do a venture financing and we're dealing with some sort of IP issue from a former founder or an equity issue from a former almost founder, it takes way too much time. I mean, solving it at the beginning, work with an attorney, a couple grand, get that done. Solving it later, that could be 10 grand of work. I mean, I could spend 15 hours of time talking through this stuff with you, and you might not get anywhere. So anyway, I said that I had 3 things that I wanted you to walk away with. One was hire an attorney. They're easy to find and they're fairly cheap. They work for food and stuff most of the time these days. Secondly is don't screw up equity. It's really, really easy to screw up equity. And third, don't screw up IP because it's really, really easy to screw up IP. So I think that I probably talked about 20 or 25 minutes. So I'm going to stop now and people can play stump the attorneys later when I have instruction. All right. Who's next?
Let's get you guys up on the stage. Hey guys, my name's Greg Ovalle. Everybody calls me OV. That's why I go with economy of movement letters here. We actually have a pretty good panel, so we will play Stump the Attorney. And since you guys do defer fees for Brady and Yokum, we should probably put a tip jar out here for you guys. But maybe not. All right, so you guys, one of the things that we're going to do tonight, we're thinking about sharing a couple, do you use the term horror stories? I mean, there's more than a couple, excuse me, Brady. But I think it sounds like from the audience, a lot of people are in the kind of pre-formative stage, which is don't have an attorney, haven't started a company yet. Is that still the case? Yeah, pretty much. So we'll kind of focus on that. Looking at you all, it's like, who might I come first? So, first of all, why don't you, other than Yokum, why don't you guys start, Santa, when you start, introduce yourself real quickly. Yeah, if you guys have one, I was just going to hand you the mic here. But.
All right, so I'm the Brady that Yokum kept referring to. So I screw up tonight, it's Yokum's fault because I spent 10 years learning everything I know from Yokum. He's, by the way, fantastic. You can't tell already. He's forgotten more than most startup attorneys can remember. And then OV is a client, so that's my nexus to the panel here. So it's a pleasure being with you. I'm a partner at Mintz, Levin, no longer with Wilson Sonsini. Boston-based law firm that works with law startups and entrepreneurs, and I'm based here in San Francisco. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks. I'm Roger Royse. I'm the founder of the Royse Law Firm. We have offices in Northern and Southern California, including San Francisco. This is the second time Yokum and I have done this panel for Mobile Monday. It was about a year ago, the first time, down in Silicon Valley. So it's good to be up here in San Francisco. It looks a little different than Microsoft, but I'm sure the content will be just as entertaining. I also have a book out called Dead on Arrival, How to Avoid the Legal Mistakes That Will Kill Your Startup. So that's primarily why I'm here. I want to talk about some of those legal mistakes. And in the back, by the front door, I did leave a vase. If you drop your card in, I'll send you the link to a free download. So I come from a little different background maybe than a lot of folks. I started my life as a tax lawyer in New York City with a big firm representing people like the Saudi government and things like that. And I've come quite a ways around, 180 degrees, since moving to the Valley in 1991. And for the longest time, as I worked in the Valley as tax lawyers, we had to fall on our swords because companies, they just weren't profitable. They didn't care about taxes. That was probably the last person they wanted to see. But Web 2.0 has changed everything as far as I'm concerned, because I see companies getting profitable now before they exit. I see them being concerned about after-tax returns to their shareholders, and I see these issues as being important now for companies. So you'll find that whenever, if you have a hammer, every problem's a nail. If you ever ask me a question, I'm going to be thinking about, well, how am I going to get the highest after-tax dollar out of this? So that's basically my personality flaw.
Hi, I'm Laura Slezinger. I'm an intellectual property and internet law attorney, transactional attorney. I've worked in-house for a number of companies, and currently I'm starting a law firm with a colleague of mine. We do deferred billing, but we also don't charge $7.75, just putting it out there. Venture gained legal. I'm also the managing director of Girls in Tech San Francisco, so very involved in the technology community through that as well.
Hi, my name is Choudary. I'm the CEO of Yetizen, which is a games-focused accelerator. So what that means is that we take in anywhere from companies like Friendsview, which is a 3D fashion game for women, just broke 5 million downloads, turned on and Kindle and a number of other great things, to Casualing, which is a casual, cross-mobile companion network. So why I'm here, you might be wondering, not a founder, not a lawyer, is because I can actually talk about all the problems founders have without breaking any competencies. So I see thousands of startups every year for the accelerator program, and I see the examples I have are actually startups that come to us as applicants, may or may not be currently in our accelerator. I've seen a number of different legal disasters. So they said, hey, you can come talk about it, and I'll be protecting the innocent, so here. One thing that I want to add, though, in terms of where my perspective comes from, is that across all of these different startup disasters, yes, it's bad. We legal advice or just what they did, really they weren't quite watching after it. There was one common pattern, which was that these entrepreneurs were not thinking strategically about who they pick as a lawyer or how they use that lawyer once the situations come up. And so I have a number of really great horror stories that I'm going to share without mentioning the law firm, without mentioning the startup, and I think you guys are going to enjoy it because we get to talk about all the great stuff that goes together as well.
Well, I was going to say, you probably need a breather, so why don't you kind of kick off with a horror story? I mean, because we were talking about this earlier. You know, you guys kind of see lots of opportunities with respect to companies being panel. But let's kick us off with one. I mean, you and I were talking about a couple this morning.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, Greg is one of the awesome members of the Yetizen program, so that's how he and I know each other that well. So yeah, one thing which I saw somewhat recently was actually from a serial entrepreneur. This was a couple of startups in Europe. And what happened was that he got funded by a very, very large VC firm and got advice from a very, very large legal firm. And there was something called liquidation preferences that was not explained to the founder. He finds out 4 years after running the company and exiting it that there was about $21 million of liquidation preferences in the best interest of the VC. Needless to say, he now no longer works with VCs, and his future startups have all been just angels. But when he told me this, I was like, oh my God, sure your lawyer didn't tell you this? He said, yeah, and my lawyer didn't tell me this. And one of the things that I realized in that discussion as well as some others, again, is see, as an entrepreneur, you are first and foremost a strategist. What tends to happen is that a lot of entrepreneurs are creative people or developers or whatever they're doing, and they don't want to deal with this business stuff. So what they tend to do is, hand it off to, a law firm, not really investigate or read things very carefully, and then get stumped by things like this. So this one was particular to me. I was like, oh my God, this is very, very shocking. There are a couple of others.
Well, I was going to say maybe for the benefit of the room, maybe one of you lucky attorneys can explain liquidation preferences. It has nothing to do with laundry.
So liquidation preference is the first money out for the preferred stock. So typically it is, today the market would be 1x. So if you put $1 million in, you get the first $1 million back. All kinds of flavors beyond that. It could be participating preferred, multiple liquidation preference, which in that case it sounds like it was an extreme
yeah, so I think
liquidation
there was,
preference.
so there are three main types of liquidation preferences. Three main types of liquidation preferences. So there's straight, there's participating preferred, and there's capital. The worst you as an entrepreneur can get is participating preferred, which is what happened. So look it up. There's a great post on VentureBeat. I think you're one of the attorneys explaining it, but watch out for things like that. This is stuff that happened after venture financing, which you didn't know. Didn't even know to ask questions.
Hey, so can you guys hear me okay with that mic? That's the only reason I think they invited me. So before we get into the term sheet, let's talk about, you talked about a couple of things, figuring out equity between founders, right? And then we'll go into kind of like so, having discussions with people that you're either starting an idea with, look, if the idea all germinates at the same time in a dorm room, if you've been working on it together for 2 months, all at the same time, that's usually pretty easy to figure out. If we can bring in people with different skill sets later, and I don't know if anybody wants to share a story or even has kind of a one like that, but I don't know if there's any hard and fast rule to kind of figure it out. It's like okay.
It is the respected one, those are the guys who really do this. It's kind of the term, it's different in different areas, different from milestone that ties to the valuation of the company. But literally, if you look at the milestone they're doing, it may not be as long as the one we do in terms of base breakdown.
Yeah.
You do take the value that person does even as a time base, it isn't a 3 years, you could say, this much value you can map it.
Okay. So, historically, have we seen any kind of algorithm that nets it out to a calculation? Because I'm not familiar with one. Have you guys seen this?
I certainly haven't. I don't know. I mean, it sounds like a great idea. I hope everybody does that. But I think it's just a matter of negotiation and relative values. And oftentimes it's just equal. You know, the bigger problem, though, is the one that Yokum alluded to earlier, is that the value for a founder of a startup company is split. It's what's going to happen in the future. And you as founders, think about the risk that you've taken on the business side to do what you're doing. I mean, it's tremendous risk. I mean, it's like salmon swimming upstream. Not a lot of you are going to make it. And just think how bad you feel when you get there and the thing that takes you is a simple legal mistake that could have been fixed. And this is one of the big ones. It's not so much getting a split wrong, it's not having investing restrictions. So when somebody leaves, you take back the stock that they didn't earn and you give it to somebody else to do their job. So my rule of thumb, and I see probably a company a day, and usually when a group comes in and they sit down in front of me, it says 3 guys in the dorm, I look around and if I see 5 founders, I really push them hard for vesting. And they look at me and they say, well, gee, why would I want to invest? Does everyone know what I mean by vesting? So you have to earn your shares. And they look at me and say, well, why would I want to unvest my shares? And why would you as my lawyer tell me to do that? You know, and I said, well, I'm trying to protect you from everybody else, company counsel. It's not so much you. It's not that you're investing your shares, you're investing everybody else's shares. And I look around and I say, if there's 5 of you, odds are almost certain that a year from now, one of you is going to be gone. That's just anecdotally, just from 30 years of doing this, almost certainly, it's the girlfriend thing, or somebody gets a divorce, or somebody
you guys
moves.
have a lot of startups and founders are hitting on every startup. I don't have
Mobile
that problem.
companies, mobile companies.
Do you?
Yeah, I think that's right. I guess one analogy I sometimes use.
Don't hit on other people's goals.
That is. Well, here's an analogy I sometimes use. I think you guys all play musical chairs as kids. You never know sometimes when the music's going to stop, and part of the way you can use it like a good lawyer is to make sure that when the music stops, everything's in place. And you never know. So you don't know when somebody's going to get in a rift. You think it's all chummy, and they're all going to keep it loosey-goosey. But it's as soon as the unforeseen rift breaks out, you want to make sure you have a good structure in place.
Hey, so what is there a 5 founders is a lot, right? What's the kind of right number? Coming in and having one guy pitching and he doesn't have a team yet. That's obviously 2, 3.
Actually, take us a slightly different direction.
Sure.
So one of my pet peeves has been that everyone seems to ask lawyers business questions. I love OB.
So that's okay. I was thinking you on a softball. That's part of what I do.
So it's a pet peeve because, think about it this way: you, the founder, are taking incredible amounts of risk, right? You are looking at your internal assets, trying to compete with a lot of better funded, larger companies out there, right? So you are the best person to decide what strategy you would go for. Maybe not. Maybe a lot of people fail. I'm not talking about the odds here. What I found happens quite a bit is that sometimes founders are so afraid of themselves that they ask lawyers business questions. And lawyers, although they're deferred, right, they're deferred maybe for the first 15 care or whatnot, eventually, they don't mind giving you business advice, they'll give you that business advice. So please, 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 if you take nothing away from me ranting here for the next 40 minutes, which is probably what's going to happen, do remember to not ask lawyers strategy business questions. You should have your own team of advisors. You should have your own network that helps you with that. You should not be asking lawyers that. Having people like Greg on your board, that's a phenomenal resource you need because he's been through the trenches multiple times, right? You need that type of person to help you with strategy. Please do not ask your lawyers for strategy.
So thanks for that. So before everybody else kills you.
Bring it on. I'm all for the founders.
I was going to jump in. Now, there's a really kind of fine line where lawyer business advice is and strategic product advice is. What market do I go after? But you and I were talking about this earlier, Brady. It's like giving an entrepreneur advice as to what's acceptable to get funded is, in a way, strategic advice. Now, your liquidation purposes thing was completely off the deep end, right? But
so can I just share what we talked about this morning?
no, absolutely.
So Greg and I were talking a little bit this morning, and Greg was saying that the best lawyers that he has ever worked with knew so many investors and so many founders. They're a phenomenal sort of hub in a network. And that's, the type of lawyer he wants in his team. And I'm like, I completely agree. When they can help you with things like that, take that type of advice, take the intros, take the connections. Ask them, what have you seen before among all the startups? Like you're with Sonsini, you work with a number of different startups. What have you seen as private equities separations? All of that is fine. But at the end of the day, how much you should give to which founder, what's your investing schedule, that's something you need to be deciding on your own.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now, the fact of the matter, to add on what you just said, was that, network's important, but also being in tune with what's market in the valley, which is what VC will fund, what valuations work, how they're going to view deferred salary. I always think of startups as kind of like you get a plane, you're building at the end of the runway, and you need to get that damn thing off the ground, right? So you've got ice on the wings, you got people throwing tumbleweeds at you, you got a flat tire, all of a sudden your runway's shorter, and you know what? If you have a bad legal thing, like we talked about this morning, or everything from deferred salary, we'll talk about IP in a minute, literally your plane is stopped at the end of the it literally hits a wall that you didn't know was there. So it's all about kind of prepping yourself so that doesn't fuck you up later, okay? Literally, because it will fuck you up. And I mean, that's the only time I'm going to cuss tonight. Not that I'm prudish or anything, but it's like, it is such a whiz bang. These guys up here, if they're surprised by a secret that you guys hide about, like you said, the founder that you never talked about before, or the fact that he was coding at Google, or you guys did this, if they don't know about that, they can't help you. You screw yourself, all right? And whether or not you've got a good relationship with your attorney, which you should have, and if you pick the right one, it's not that hard to do. You guys need to be truthful and honest there, because sometimes, you know what? They're going to tell you stuff you don't want to hear. And it's painful, it's going to cost you money. But the goal is to be able to play another round or go to OT so you get that thing off the ground.
So the flip side, if you don't mind me, just jump in there for a second. I was about to disagree with you, but then you kept talking. And
Don't worry, I'll win anyway.
We got 5 lawyers who are going to get 6 opinions here tonight. There's a famous Supreme Court justice who once said that a page of experience is worth a volume of logic. And that is the flip side of what you're saying is a lot of people, you people are really smart. People who start companies in technology are so smart, my God, your IQs must add up to 100. And when you come into a lawyer's office, you can go Google this stuff, and you can download the documents, and you can read it, and you can say, well, logically, I'm a bright boy, this is how it all works, I'm just going to make my own legal decisions. Now, I wouldn't presume to go code your software, right? And that's where people run into trouble, because a lot of this law is much more experience than it is logic. It's much more just lore than law. And I think that's, when we talk about legal mistakes, I mean, there's the obvious stuff that we're talking about here, but there's the more subtle stuff. Some things you don't know that are going to get you, that are going to hurt you.
So one of the things, I was not recommending just reading the book. Have your own network of advisors, entrepreneurs who've done that before, been through the trenches. That's another form of information you need to be the best strategist for your firm. But that being said, do we have any ground rooms of my heritage, like Sunny and yeah, you? So you guys know the word Jagad, right? Jagad? Yeah. So does anyone else know it? TechCrunch is written about it as well. Yeah? No. So what Jagad means in a nutshell is that when you have no resources or very little resources, and your back is against the wall, you figure out some resourceful, clever way of making things work. To me, that is the essence of entrepreneurship. We have this term at Yetizen that every entrepreneur we look at, we always ask after the first meeting, did this person have Jagad in one time? Which is quite funny if you mention your business for there's something I've noticed over the last several startups I've worked with and the last several that I've interviewed, which is that as an entrepreneur, you are great at Jagad, and you actually get better at Jagad over time as you keep doing more and more businesses, right? Your lawyers, by their very nature, the incentives they have, the background they have, the leverage that they think your startup has for you, they do not think that way. Therefore, you as an entrepreneur are the best strategist. Jagad, your lawyer will be like, oh my God, there are multiple times we'll have decisions like that. And so if you trust in yourself, and you have a great network of other non-legal advisors as well, telling you about the different implications and different strategic routes you can take, then you're more likely to be able to do that. And guess where innovation comes from?
Hey, just to take a real quick break. Favorite apps that you guys play right now, Yokum on this earlier. We talked about this earlier. We are in a mobile. Yeah, thanks.
Probably games, Kingdoms at War by Anton Chekhov and Google names that
Frontline Commando, simply because it allows me to shoot things.
They don't have to be games.
Frontline Commando, and as an app, I really like Sidecar. You want to root soccer?
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, it's saving me a lot of money. And then, of course, I have to mention one of my accelerator, just because it's so great. It's Friends of 3D Fashion Game Coordinators, the only 3D game for women out there. So
Because I live without Uber, and I use my bar method app on a very regular basis for booking classes. I can't say classes like that.
Well, I don't play games, but my
It doesn't have to
six-year-old.
be a game, just the mobile.
Okay, but my 6-year-old
that's
daughter
more you
is.
cannot trust who's not there.
My daughter is keeping all the game developers in business with my iPad. But the app I like the best is one of the companies I incubated in my office is named Candy Jar. And they've got a mobile advertising app that allows you to take the real world and put it into a virtual, think of Pinterest for mobile. And I think, and again, I'm just a lawyer, so I don't know anything about strategy or business, but I think this is the next big thing.
Okay, 1.0.
And the thing is, I'm as much a VC as a lot of VCs are, because, us lawyers up here, Yokum and I, we have to bet on these companies when we take them on as clients. So after a while, it's survival of the fittest. You either get good at picking winners, or you go do something else. You do divorce law or something. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Wait, your tax lawyer?
My practice is much broader than that. We're pretty much a general business law firm that started out in tax. But I didn't have enough personality to be a tax lawyer, so I had to go and start a company work. But what I was saying is I really like this. I really like Candy Jar. That's my favorite app.
I can't live without Dropbox. Everything I need is always there.
You're gonna end it on Dropbox?
Evernote.
Someone give him your app.
And me? What do you guys, does anyone have Action Movie, which you do like movie effects over any video thing? That's kind of cool. And I've been playing around with, actually I really like Songza and 8-track music, because it's kind of like songs that tell you, hey, what time of the day it is. And knows it's Monday night, right? It's like you're working out, are you drinking, are you need to chill? So it's more genre flavored as opposed to Pandora, which is pick an artist. Hey, so let's talk about IP. There you go. The middle of the lineup.
Okay, so I'm going to echo what you said. Talk to an attorney early. It is very important. Any investors, if you're one of the lucky startups that has interested investors, are going to want to see a clean house. And one of the most important things is ownership. If you have any type of IP, before you buy the domain name, you make sure you can trademark it to your patents, to any, as they mentioned before, the code that your partner might have brought over from their previous employer that you've now integrated into your software. Very, very bad. So you really have to pay attention to all that stuff, the ownership. If you have somebody developing something for you, make sure it's assigned. All these I see regularly, and it's not good. You are going to have to work that out. A lot of times investors are going to either not want to deal with it if it looks too bad. That could prevent you from going forward with them, or it's going to be painful getting it all wrapped up.
So this is another horror story.
Your little child of horrors here.
I know, I collect them at this panel. You make the mistake of letting me actually tell them. There is a particular startup that was in final due diligence for an investment, a very well-known investor. And what happened in this startup's case is that they had a bunch of patents for the underlying back-end technology, which they had worked with the lawyers on. But simple attribution of who owns what on the more basic things like UI, etc., that was never done. So they would employ people and pay them for those contracts. A very, very large law firm, whose name I will not take, was working with this startup, pre-due diligence, and basically, you're saying, "Earl, is my paperwork in line? Is it going to be okay? Is it going to go through due diligence all right?" And the lawyer says, "Yeah, it is for sure." And then it comes back from the investor's lawyer and says, "Hey, there's X, Y, and Z that you don't have any ownership attribution." So, needless to say, this kind of ended up delaying the entire investment process for at least 2 weeks, which, if you ask, I'm sure they don't care. They'll be like, "I understand how those students are working on other clients." So, your contracts with work for hire, any employee you ever have, doesn't matter if you pay them or give them equity or whatever it is, there needs to be some kind of contractual like paperwork saying that the company is obligated to do the company is
Okay. Add a little bit to it. Like, you talk to a bunch of lawyers. We could be up here talking all day. I do think there's an element of early stage startups is trying to find somebody who's a pragmatist and who can help you focus on the right things, because you can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? You gotta focus on what you need to focus on. In some companies are very IP intensive, and that's what you're pitching to the investors is this is an IP play. Well, then you better have your IP in order, right? If it's not an IP play, maybe you don't need to spend $25,000 to $50,000 capital bank getting trademarks, right? Because those are essential to what we're doing. So I think there's just an element of real street smart pragmatism and focus on what you can do.
I think the other thing is also from the investors. So this particular place is very, very well known investor. But if you look at, you're taking a small angel funding, 25, 75K, do they care if you have 6 professional patents out there which probably will cost you maybe not, right? They may not be the best. So again, as a strategist, you should be thinking about who your investor is, what they're looking for, what are some of the things that matter to them. And there's no way, they've had years over you oftentimes, so there's no way you can learn that really quickly. Because again, that's where your network, that's where your other source of information come in, as well as your online business.
Hey guys, are we covering stuff that's of interest so far? Yeah? Is one of, I love it, you're the first one. One over his hand, please.
It seemed like your report key questions, there is a description for the
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that
Okay.
that was just marketing. That was just marketing.
He's got to be the engineer.
You have to
He's
be
not a BD guy. Not a BD guy. Like very, yeah. All right. So list off which ones did we cover yet that are of interest?
How do I set up my company for
Okay. So, all right.
Call Yokum.
How do I split ownership? I mean,
Well, we've got
that's IP.
that one's like I don't know if there's one easy answer to that one. I mean, it's like get in the room and work it out.
I think the general consensus was take split up ownership and have a vesting schedule involved, protect the company, and then my thing, which was like know your founders. Oh wait, I didn't mention that. Know your founders and be able to work things out.
So Ms. Realize it's a third, right? Not that much split it up, is that?
I don't know.
It depends. It depends.
Yeah, there's no absolute rule. I mean, it's
Like
like
she said, be able to work it out. You will always fight. You will always fight. I work with legal laws. You're going to fight. But you're going to be able to work it out with some objective metrics that everybody can say this is fair, this set of metrics, and this right. It's the only way to work out. Otherwise, the powerful person crushing the other, and later that other person always will say.
The other thing to keep in mind is if you're doing a third, 50-50, you were signaling to investors about what type of founder you are is very important. This is actually drifting away from the regulations. But if you have 50-50, for example, and one of you is the CEO, what is that? The CEO just for title? The CEO can't really make decisions without the other's consensus. Like, we're asking investors to invest in a business that makes decisions only by consensus, or at least that's the signal you're giving. So keep that in mind when you're figuring out what equity each person should get. Everything equal may work great in terms of how your startup runs, but it actually signals sometimes the wrong range to the investors.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have a question. If you'll companies might be funded by corporates as opposed to VCs. Are there any specific modules or things that people would do differently in the incorporation or in the equity or
No.
Okay. But I was going to say, as somebody that's done a lot of BD stuff, startups working with corporates, it's kind of like breathing outside your species. Okay, I mean, it can work early on as a startup. Man, it's challenging because their time frames are different, their urgency is different, and I think when you get to the right scale, strategics are basically considered dumb money. They're not valuation sensitive, but early on, that can be challenging just from a business standpoint, not a legal standpoint. It's pretty easy to do the contracts because they got a lot of attorneys in-house.
Right, just to add to that, from a business standpoint, you can end up, depending what stage you're you're actually in SEOs that we're just talking about, you can actually, and I've seen this multiple times with startups, get better valuations and produce less capital investment because there were other things involved that actually made it a strategic fit, but you can see or other private equity. The thing to keep in mind though is that you're also limiting the exit potential at only one strategic, so depending on that way, or go to private money.
Right, and the flip side is that strategics will often, if not always, ask for a right of refusal or a right of notification or a right of first offer. They want the business. That's why they're investing in it. So I like doing deals with strategics too. I think they are a lot easier to get along with on these financial terms. But it's that one term that you always spend a lot of time fighting over. So again, I'm going to disagree with what I... No, this is the last lecture. But if you like, I'll disagree with that too. You know, I think it's...
Except on his foot with my heels
I think it's a more complex question when you say, gee, I'm going to have a corporate or a strategic investor, what kind of entity should I be? And that's where you really need to think about, well, what is your investor after? Because a lot of corporate investors are tax sensitive, and they would love to have you invest in an LLC so they can get R&D credits, or they can...
So off balance sheet versus running through the P&L?
Well, it's a flow-through, is what I mean. It's a flow-through of tax benefits. And so there's another level of questions and analysis that I think you go to once you raise it to that level. And then, by the way, we haven't talked about international. You know, I mean, I've been doing financings with, you know, Shannon license companies in Ireland lately. I mean, once you get international, it's like a lawyer's playground. There's so many different alternatives. So forget about any fee quote you just heard about once that happens, though, because, you know, it can be a very intensive negotiation and a lot of planning. So I just think it's a more careful, studied response if you've got an investor that is not your typical plain vanilla Sand Hill Road crowd.
Another thing with the strategic to keep in mind is think about the life cycle of your company as well as when you would like to get the opportunity when you go right. So if you think that that time frame is very short, it might make sense to go for strategic and just work towards an exit. But make sure, like, you know, I don't know what business you're in, but in games, right, sometimes I think it's dangerous to work with a publisher that way, that publisher is never required, right? So you have to be very aware of which type of company you're going for and whether that makes sense with your particular startup.
So let me walk you guys through a scenario. So say Brady and I started a company. I've been working on it for 2 years. Brady joined. We've been working for 6 months. We get them angels to get us $400K. Brady and I start to knock it along. And he doesn't realize that whatever paperwork we had between us, I have a deferred salary thing. So you owe me, I don't know, for me to leave, let's say 100K, and we have 400K coming in. So how are investors going to react to 400K coming in and immediately 100K goes out the door?
Not well. I mean, this is some of the maybe seems fairly obvious to us, or just those of you who've been through it. But you know, also keep in mind that part of positioning the company the right way for investment in the future is how is that investor going to view this company? And so if they're about ready to write a big check, they don't want to see half of that check go back out and pay for things that don't add value to the business going forward, but they're just paying for past mistakes. So don't always treat the future investor is some panacea to solve all the problems.
So I think after this, we're going to assume all of you guys have attorneys working on your behalf. So let's talk about maybe some interesting term sheet clauses. Some that can be a little mysterious and some that can make you thinking of terminology. We talked about the other day.
I saw one the other day where a founder, well-meaning founder, more like the kid who's a coder and hopes to have a big business in the future, took some, they needed a couple $100,000 to make rent and pay some coders and get to the point where they could actually get a term sheet. Took money in from, they thought, a friend of a friend or friend of the family who had a lawyer in Florida who crafted something. And he was sort of thinking along the lines of a couple $100,000 and 10% of the business. So what came through was a warrant, was a note to pay him back the couple $100,000 after a very short period of time. So he was going to have to raise money or some of the revenue to pay this back. And it had a warrant that was exercisable for 20 years that would allow him to purchase 10% of the company at the time, anytime over the next 20 years. So for a couple $100,000, he built a $700 million business, $1 billion business. This person was going to get a couple $100 million for $100,000. It was a good deal. I told him if he did that deal, he would never get funded because he would so many credits and he would get
Let me chime in with a couple of things that when companies are getting incorporated, one of the things that for really promising companies that I need to talk about, one is super voting common stock. So, that's obvious. The second is something called founders preferred stock. So, super voting common stock. Google has it, LinkedIn has it, Mark Pincus of Zynga had it from day one, and Pincus got it through, Union Square Ventures and Fred Wilson and Dan Feld, the founder of the Series A, and got it through Big Gordon and Planet Perkins and the Series B. So if you are a hotshot entrepreneur who has a good story about being paranoid about control, because I think that Pincus had some problems in his previous company, he would say, I need to have control of this company forever and ever, I want super voting common stock. If you deal with venture funds like Andreessen Horowitz, Mark Andreessen wrote a blog post in 2009 saying, hey, I'm in favor of Google's dual-class stock structure. So there are at least 2 or 3 Andreessen Horowitz portfolio companies where, as a result of that, when they got the Andreessen Horowitz term sheet, some smart attorney said, let's put in super voting common stock and see if it goes through. So that is one thing that hot startup companies should think about. The second thing that hot startup companies are thinking about is something called founders preferred stock, or otherwise Series F. Basically, the people at Founders Fund are going, well, geez, it kind of sucks that some startup companies need to get sold fairly early on because the founders are basically cash poor. They got no money and working for nothing. They need a down payment on a house or something. And they might be forced to sell their company for just pure economic reasons. So in order to solve that problem, some smart folks decided, okay, if we issue founders a flavor of stock that gets to flip into the future venture financing stock, like Series A or Series B, and you can sell that stock to the VCs in connection with venture financing, that would be a very cool thing to do. So those are kind of 2 things that, I need to talk about with very, very promising startup companies to make sure that it's doesn't implement. The Yokum company, talking about that stuff.
Are those accepted, meaning the founders?
So super voting common stock. The guy that's the largest proponent of it is a guy named Rosati, who runs the Founder Institute. So he's got probably about 500 companies that have graduated from the Founder Institute that have super voting common stock. As a practical matter, every company I think that's gotten finance and equity financing has been forced to give it up. But eventually, there's enough attention paid to these founder issues that has become a trend. And founders preferred stock, if you get an angel investment from somebody associated with the founders fund, somebody's probably said, hey, did your attorneys tell you about this? Or if you work with John Easter.
So one just to add on to that, those are great points, but I think the super voting common stock is a variation of the theme that thinking about your cap structure and making sure it's what makes these companies work well is if there's a few people that you need to deal with. So I can see why investors would be in favor of a super voting common stock because you're investing in its founder and you know that founder is going to have common. So it's very easy. It takes the guesswork out of it. If you've got 40 common holders and nobody clearly owns the majority, and you have to negotiate the next financing or exit. It's very difficult. The same way for an angel round, if you're putting together in a Series C round where you've got lots of friends and family but nobody controls the majority, then who do you negotiate with? And that can become a very difficult process when you have a bunch of people go away on fishing trips and you can't get into that.
Hey, so I'm just going to ask you guys real quickly, let's share some market data. So let's just talk about caps and convertible notes. When I started doing this, caps and convertible notes was awesome. But now we've got caps on them. Or people after them are going to want to do convertible notes. Yokum, what do you see? I'm going to go down the line.
The current market, why Combinator forces the market, is convertible debt with a price cap. We have optional conversion to preferred stock at every set price. I would say that if you're an average company, if you're an average out of the 80 companies coming out of this class, I would say that you're probably raising money at somewhere between $5 and $8 million price cap or implied valuation or aspirational valuation. I think the top 10% of the companies would be raising either a price equity round or they would be doing a price cap in the $50 to $20 million range. I think the bottom 10 or the bottom 25% of companies are going to end up not raising more than $50 to $30 million.
So my experience is mostly gaming, and unfortunately gaming is a lot more than all over this place, so I can't really give any particular numbers, but I guess, convertible debt with a account value, account percentages, changes depending on what the game is.
So we've all had that experience in the old days when we started doing convertible debt and not thinking about caps. And then down the road, eventually the investor calls you up and says, well, wait a minute, my money's working against me. The better it does, the higher the valuations I have to convert into. So I see that in all convertible debt rounds. It's interesting, this one VC I know, he told me he won't get involved in a deal without it because he was involved in a company where the early investors, they didn't have a price cap, so they went and discouraged the later investors from investing because they didn't like the valuation, it was too high. So think about the weird dynamic. You've got investors in the company working against the company. So I know that sometimes companies push back on that a little bit, but it's in everybody's interest to do that. In terms of market, I think it just depends on the company. It's just all over the place.
Yeah, I don't know if these are too nuanced terms, but 10 years ago when I first started working with Yokum, it would just be straight convertible debt. Nobody talked about caps. The convertible debt was a way to bring money in without having to have this valuation discussion, because at the very early stage, what the heck is the company worth, and what's my uncle Bob going to assign as a valuation? You wait until a sophisticated VC would come in and price the round, and you get a discount off of that on that note off the conversion. So that was sort of your kicker for putting money in early. Then all of a sudden, there became this discussion of Series C rounds and price rounds versus convertible debt with a price cap, and now you're sort of in this in-between round between pricing. But I still think the ease and convenience of a convertible note, maybe give a price cap. I still don't think it's something that we always get it, but it certainly has become more the norm for the market. So I think that's Yokum is pretty spot on the range of terms.
Okay, so you want to go to Stump the Attorney? Yeah? Did I see any hands? Yeah, we got a couple of stumps? All right.
Not necessarily purely Stump, but I was just curious what
everyone's seeing with respect to Jobs Act.
Good question. Actually, Brady, you got the microphone.
Still waiting for the implementing regulations.
Why don't you explain what that is to someone who don't have the benefit of it?
Great, I'll do it because I'm doing a webinar on Thursday morning. Okay, so the only part of the Jobs Act that anybody in this room really cares about is this crowdfunding thing. Hey, I can go on the internet and raise money from a zillion people. So there's been a lot of press about this in April or so. You know, you have go to a website, you know, put up a thing, kind of like Kickstarter that you're selling equity. None of this stuff works until the SEC establishes new rules. It is very unlikely that these rules are going to happen on time. They're not supposed to be implemented until at least they're supposed to be done by December 31st with respect to crowdfunding. As a practical matter, I think I wrote a public piece for the American Bar Association. I basically found that the crowdfunding act was stupid, and it would have no practical impact on Silicon Valley venture financing. So that is the only part of the Jobs Act that I think that people in this room really care about. There's another part of the Jobs Act that relates to, hey, if I'm at demo day or pitch day for like Techstars, and I'm saying, give me money, is that a public offering of securities? And the SEC has gone back and actually said, you know, that probably is, but we're going to change our rules so that if all you do is sell to really rich people, accredited investors, we don't care. That was a problem for securities attorneys for a long time, and the SEC is actually going to fix that gap now. So those are the only two things of the Jobs Act that anyone in this room should really think about, because those are the only provisions that I read. And there's like a lot of crap in there, like 5 years and whatnot, that don't really affect anyone in this room.
Let me add to that, because I've done about 3 or 4 panels on this now. The second thing that Yokum said is probably the more significant. That's the change to the rules that allow advertising solicitation publicly for accredited only investments, because most of the deals I do are accredited only. So that means that in those deals, the company, they can, if anyone still uses phone books, they can go through the phone book and call people, they can skywrite, they can have a Facebook page. Couldn't do all that stuff before. I think that could be very significant. I think that's the most important part of the act. With respect to the crowdfunding provisions, it's a fairly extensive discussion, but it's gotten a lot of press because people see that. And you're right, we don't have implementing regulations yet, and we don't know what the SEC is going to do with this. But it's going to be very expensive. You can only raise $1 million within a 12-month period. There are pretty strict limits on net worth requirements that people that do invest, even though you can solicit and they can be non-accredited. The problem is just big picture, you know, and as much as I hate to agree with everybody here, I'm going to. Big picture is that any of you in this room, if you're doing a crowdfunded deal, it means that you probably already talked to the angels and they said no, you talked to the VCs and they said no, and you're going out and doing that deal because you couldn't find money here. I think it may work okay if we resolve some of the technical issues for consumer products companies. Like if you have a really thin watch that you want to pre-sell or something like that, because people will invest in that. You know, companies like that will typically go to VCs anyway. But for tech companies, it's not going to be all that common.
I'd agree spot on. I think the general solicitation provisions are the more key. The crowdfunding sounds neat, but it doesn't really go back to the point about having to think about your cap table and having way too many stockholders. You want a bunch of nameless, faceless folks that you got off the internet as your stockholders. I don't see that being a viable fundraising strategy for real Silicon Valley venture-backed companies.
Any other questions?
If you have, for example, if you have several founders, do you have to save some money for later people who will join the company, or you have to divide everything away right now?
I'm sorry, so like, you don't have to save it, but later people will double you.
Oh, so those two dilute later and then go to the lawyer.
He said that if you have several founders, and do you have to save any equity for later people, or you just divide it all up right now? So usually there's a pool, right? There's an employee stock options pool and people put that aside. But even if you don't have that future equity
So on the investing for the founders, let's say that you're a single or two-person company, you want to bring your founders. At that point, there's a lot of sweat equity that you build. Is that also going investing, or is that something that
I mean, I think the standard vesting terms in the Valley are 4-year vesting, 1-year cliff, and the founders don't have a cliff because they're not getting paid and after 6 months, which is often or 6 weeks in the stock. But for later founders, it would typically be you get vesting credit when you start working on the project. So show up later, 4-year vest, start when you start.
so you would just do a larger investing pool? So you say you have 2 million dollars, 14 million dollars, 6 months.
Okay, so the question is, if some founders are putting in actual real-time money and trying to understand, that's not really a vesting question. That's probably more of an opportunity cost and risk question on equity allocation as opposed to a vesting question. So I think it's kind of irrelevant to vesting, although the way that one might want to analyze it is, like if I'm a founder and I'm putting in real cash, maybe I should treat that money like I'm an investor and there's no vesting related to that. And maybe with respect to the stock that I get because of my sweat equity, that is subject to vesting. There's probably different ways that you can intellectualize like how to divvy up the pie depending on what people put in. So typical situations, you've got like one founder that's like sold a company before, so that person's fairly cash rich. Another founder, that hasn't done that, doesn't have any money. They might be kind of equal contributors. One might give one person might not need a salary. One person might be able to fund the company. That's a fairly typical fact pattern, and it might get worked out via the equity split. It could be 60-40 because one guy is taking more economic risk because he's bridging the company a couple $100K, and both sides agree with it. It could be that opportunity costs come into play. So if one guy is giving up a $1 million Facebook retention deal, and another person is like, coming off the PhD program, the guy that's got the Facebook retention deal opportunity cost might ask for a bigger slice of the pie. So I mean, I talked about this before. There ain't no good answer to that. They're all irrelevant.
So I'm just about the issue of, I'm going to ask a question. What are the problems you guys see for a really super successful company? And you have information about the problem. And what are your problems? Is it market? So it's not market. So a lot of times with some of the platforms, you can resell without getting that pay. So we look at it like, oh, you're going to get people to buy this, there's a market here. So it helps you in angel round, or it helps say that CEO to convince people to buy.
When you say pre-buy, that would be
it's like,
but it's not a consumer mobile application. But for certain aspects,
it could be software too.
So we need to kind of clarify. So when lawyers talk about crowdfunding, we're talking about selling securities and equity bits to the public. When we're talking about Kickstarter, that's like selling products. That's not a sale of a security. So that's why Kickstarter gets to do what it does, and that's why something at GoGo gets shut down. Yeah, Indiegogo gets shut down in California.
That's helpful. The question I would ask is, what are some of the changing models that are coming? You see, when we really successful companies that niche, third emerging problem, one literally has with the changing law, when an investor, season as it's converting from his IPO shares to his actual investment. There's issues around whether it was qualified or not. So that's one of the things I was asking, the change in definition.
Well, the definition of accredited investment is typically, yeah, I mean, it's pretty basic. It's income,
It's changed recently. So, well, it excludes a personal residence. That definition has been around for 50 years, since 33 Act, I think. If it had been inflation adjusted from when we first got the exception, you'd have to be worth $30 million today to be an accredited investor. It's kind of pretty.
So he was offered a scout. That was what the problem.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes people have to get into that analysis as to whether they can count their second home and what if underwater. But, you know, I'd like to touch the bigger issue you raised, because we have to talk about trends and what's new and what's different, because this issue with liquidation preferences, it's a real issue, but that's been around forever. You know, founders have been working for the VCs forever, you know, if they don't, you know, if they're not careful. But I see the valley and the world and California is getting just smaller and smaller all the time. I see more and more foreign money, more and more international investors, and you start seeing international terms, and they're different. You know, for example, I've done about 3 China deals this year, and they all had this funny valuation adjustment. So in other words, if the company, you know, the investor will invest at a certain valuation, but if you don't hit certain metrics the next year, you go back and retroactively adjust the valuation. That's something that's pretty common in China, for example. And I don't know what stage your companies are in, but if you're going to go out for money, you're going to run into international investors, and you're going to start seeing terms that will make a typical Silicon Valley lawyer, you know, stop and take notice.
Yeah, actually, I want to add to that. Yeah, so I've seen a number of European startups who never take venture financing, and eventually I asked, like, why would you take venture financing? And they said that, you know, venture financing in Europe ends up looking very, very, very hard. So if you don't hit your metrics, the equity of the VC can sometimes go. They have clauses like that. So which is why, you know, these guys end up taking a lot of angel financing if they can get it connected, and that's why you end up seeing fewer startups. And then another point that Brady and I were speaking about this morning, which I've seen, I understand in the context of German startups, although I think the other European ones might be similar, is that there's a tendency as startups bring from Germany to not want to give advisors equity. And it's something like 99.9% of the equity is still in the hands of the CEO. And we were talking about why, and there was a very interesting post that came out about a game company from Germany called Yokum, which you guys should check, of their incentive plan for their employees. There's no equity in it whatsoever. And I think one of the reasons for it is because taxation on equity is just so high that anyone other than the CEO and the founder just can't deal with that. So they're used to, culturally, they're used to not giving equity to anyone else. Those startups come here, they're looking at advisors, they're looking at investment, they're like that. So much equity that I haven't seen this ever. It's a huge cultural difference because of the equity level.
Yeah, so thank your stars you're here, because to use kind of a here and there analogy, the audience is the number of VCs here in the Valley. If you go to Europe, might be half the people on the stage. So if you get a meeting with them, they're pretty much giving you terms like this. And it's, if you ever seen that show Shark Tank,
Yes.
it's everything like 51% of your company, right? And they can do that there because, you know, there's not a lot of options. It's changing, but you're right. I mean, it's attitudes. It's also, you know, that's why kind of people flock here.
There used to be, the way it used to be is you have to always have a C Corp company before the VC will put your money in. But I've seen what deals done with LLCs now.
I think the Delaware C Corp is still the far and away the most common structure, and disagree. But you know, part of it also is I think you don't. You can think about optimizing or coming up with a creative structure, but if your legal structure is distracting from your time with the VC about whether they're going to make an investment or not, then you really done yourself a disservice. So part of this is just trying to make your legal framework look pretty much as plain vanilla and rote as possible, so that the VC can focus on the business and not get distracted on other issues. Plus, there are things like many VCs, by their own charter, can't invest in LLCs that are pass-through entities because they've got unlimited business taxable income that wouldn't have many nonprofit LPs. So the reasons that it's not just because they don't like it or they don't need to have the tax pass-through. There's a real historical reason. But you want to be able to check through these legal terms. If we're front and center in your financing, then that's a problem.
Yeah, sure.
I agree with that. It is the standard in the Valley, and that's the reason of VC. It's not only UBTI is also foreign investors, so they just can't. However, here's a scenario that I've run into over and over. The founders sit down and they say, we're going to form a company, it's got to be a Delaware C corporation because we're going to go get venture capital funding and then we're going to go public. If it plays out that way, that's great. But oftentimes it won't. What they'll do is they'll get some friends and family money, and they'll do debt. And then they'll get maybe some angel money, and they'll do debt. And then they'll sell the company. Well, they could have been an S corp at that point, potentially. They could have been an LLC at that point. They could have changed their tax burden from 65% to maybe 45%, or 40%, or maybe lower. So, you know, I think if you're going to go that route, you have to be absolutely sure, you know, that you are building a company for the VC community. Because otherwise, as a tax lawyer, I just hate them. I just hate C corps, even though we have to live with them, kind of like VCs.
You can, but it's it winds up being expensive, and it just gets more and more expensive and more complicated. The further down the road you get, the more complex you're going to get.
Brady, don't smile when you say expensive.
You talk about the benefits of having investing founders. Are there some tax implications?
Yeah, so that's the 83B election that people are talking about. And the concept is if the stock is subject to a substantial risk of forfeiture, which is the way vesting restriction is, it's not treated as owned by the taxpayer, the employee, until such time as the stock vests. Well, at that time, then you pick up income equal to the value of the stock, and presumably the stock is going to go up and up in value. So if you make an 83B election within 30 days of being issued the stock, then you close the compensation element and treat it as being owned by the employee on the date that it's issued. So yes, there are tax consequences, but it's pretty easy. You could drive a Hummer through the loopholes to get around those issues.
130-day loophole is the one one-page disclosure in your RSPA is to make sure you file your 83B within 30 days. It's an IRS rule, and there's no making it up. So when your lawyer says file it, file it.
Yeah, don't defer that. Any other questions? In the back?
More basic question. What makes us so
Do you mind standing up so we can go to our
I'm a foreign entrepreneur, so I'm here to try to raise money from this area. What do you guys say is the most basic IP protection that I have from the side?
Basic IP protection?
Yeah, because I'm pretty low.
What can without being exact, be precise about what you do? What are you labs, games?
Yeah, I'm trying to cooperate with my company here in the US to try to raise money.
Game company. Okay, so
what should I do about protecting my
you're in a game space. That's the challenge right there.
Talk to an attorney.
So let's just,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Talk to an attorney. If you're concerned about the games, talk to an attorney. I'm not going to get into the whole software patent issue right now, but you should consult somebody about that. That's going to be important.
It's really the question. Just the real basics of IP.
Yeah, each thing is different. People seem to get them confused. Copyright usually is going to refer to some form of content, like videos or pictures or something you've written in a blog. Trademark is generally your company name or slogan. And patent is an invention of some sort. They're software patents currently, and this has been a whole big mess.
You know, if I could add to that a little bit, because what I've been hearing more and more lately is people coming in with a question like that, and they're saying, you know, I read about Coca-Cola, you know, they don't have patents, and I'm just going to rely on trade secret protection. I'm not going to spend any money on patent lawyers. We're just going to keep it all secret. That's going to be our IP strategy. My personal view is that if you do that, when your employees walk out the door, all your trade secrets walk out the door too. but it's an idea that's become very persistent, and I'm hearing it more and more, and people are clinging to it more and more tenaciously.
As I said earlier, make sure that any employees or anybody that's working on developing anything for you, there's an agreement with them, everything, ownership and everything is assigned to you, and it's very clear up front that your company owns anything that anyone produces.
Just one quick add-on that picked up in my ears from the tweet when we opened this keynote earlier. So the point about leaving a company and can you go, do the competitive, you work at Google and you left and you want to go start something that's competitive with Google, can you go do that? So yes, in California, non-competes are not enforceable, but it doesn't mean you get to use their confidential information and their trade secrets. So just because you might assume that your trade secrets are walking out the door, if you go use your former employer's trade secrets in your new endeavor, you may well get one of those nasty grants from one of us.
So actually, I'm going to read a little bit into your question, and you tell me if it's striking. I think what you're asking is, here I am talking to all these investors, and probably a bunch of publishers as well, strategics and whatnot. How do I make sure they don't just copy my name? Is that the question?
Something like that.
Something like that. Well, if that was the question, what I would say is, you're in games, you're in the world of fast followers. You're in the world where some companies actually have litigation as a business strategy. So the only, from a strategy perspective, protection for you really is just making something really great, really fast, and learning very great. Probably not the answer you wanted to hear, but that's the nature of games.
All right, guys, I got this on.
That means
you guys did everybody. Let's blow a round of applause for our panelists. Hopefully we answered all of your questions. If we didn't, feel free to come up and talk to them. Real quickly for me, I've got a local startup. My co-founder and I, we've got 110 million installs. We're kind of figuring out if you're a designer engineer.
All right, guys, this will be on Ustream. Thank you to Pereira O'Dell. Thank you to Yokum Sonsini. And